Hi, I am Laura, the founder of New Earth Practitioners. Welcome to our podcast. I am here with Andrea Michelle. She's a wonderful astrologer. We are going to dive into intuition as our guidance, our inner compass, and talk a little bit about her journey around intuition. So, Andrea, what is the significant turning point in your intuitive development in your life?
Mm. The significant turning point was when I decided to pay attention to it. I guess you could say I'd been intuitive. I think all of us are, but we just don't know how to recognize it, and we're not taught how to recognize it. And with some of us, it's stronger than others. But I would have psychics or whatever people that I would see are just like, trust your intuition, trust your intuition. And I'm like, I don't know what the heck that means. And it wasn't until Um, I don't know that I can pinpoint a specific date, Laura, but it was um, maybe about 12 years ago or a little bit over that, where I was just like, okay, so it's subtle, or it seemed more subtle at first, but let's just go for it. And so I did, and it wasn't always right. And so that would be humbling too. And so it was a matter of discerning if I had to leave me to gather information or whether I could stay in my experience and have the intuition be funneled through my more immediate experience. And then it became um, just a real strong guidepost for me and continues to be, in addition with other wisdoms, but we'll talk about that.
So, do you feel like it's been a growing process for you around that? Or do you feel like it's been pretty steady?
Oh, I feel like there's always more refinement, more levels of discernment, greater levels of subtlety around what I'm picking up.
Yeah.
And am I paying attention to my environment to be a mirror for whether or not my intuition is actually picking up on what's true, or just picking up on something in the field that may not really still be accurate to the moment? So it's kind of like how do I make it a dialogue rather than a monologue? Because I feel like it can be very easy for me, and especially in the past, to just kind of go into my own world to grab my intuition, but is it really relevant to what's happening in the situation, in the circumstance, either with another person or with the event itself? Like, is there a dialogue or is it just a monologue? To me, that's a good reference point.
I've never heard anybody describe it quite like that. And so that makes me think of how you're working with your intuition and how do you develop this practice
Mm.
that you have in particular
Mm.
around your intuition and related types of informational pathways.
Yeah. Now, it's funny when I hear myself talking, because I've never talked about it like that before, too.
Right.
So it's spontaneous. It's not, I want to be clear that I'm not talking about like making sure that somebody else is in agreement with my intuition. That's not the dialogue. It's more, am I open to what's here? Am I vulnerable to being wrong? Am I vulnerable to having it being refined? And for me, going more deeply into my instinctual wisdom and the places where I feel as a species, our instincts have been kind of hijacked by trauma, because we're not really in right relationship with our instincts. Our instincts are part of us that I call our pan consciousness, which is it's non it's where we are just rooted in all of life, all of earthly life. Like, we're just part of the family of life on earth. And it's an endowment that we get from being humans on this earth. And animals have instincts, and even plants have the instincts to survive, to grow, to thrive, to communicate, to collaborate, to even experience joy. I feel is not just a uniquely human experience. So being rooted more in that already feels it puts me to in an advantage in terms of like being in relationship with more than just myself, my personal kind of bubble. So rooting in my instinctual nature, which hasn't been the easiest road, but it's complemented my intuition, and my intuition complements that instinct realm. And I feel like they really kind of when working together, it gives me a more accurate, visceral knowing of things. And my whole body, my whole being becomes more of an accurate barometer of what's true for me and what's not.
I love that. I have not used that term, and I was really curious about it because you didn't mention that before this podcast. And how I see intuition is in agreement with you, where it's the liminal space, where it's the spiritual, it's the galaxies, the stars, in the natural environment.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe what you're talking about, or what I'm talking about, is that attunement of the instinctual element of
Mm-hmm.
when you bring those together and you're able to navigate in ways. And I think about our ancestors, and I'm assuming that you have European lineage like myself on a biological level. So we're the ones that kind of expanded out. And so I imagine the women touching plants,
Mm-hmm.
reading with their fingers, is this a plant to eat? It wasn't a scientific experiment of like, I'm going to eat this and Jane died. Oh, that's not a good plant. That's very ineffective. But
Yeah.
using the intuition or instinct, like what you're talking about, is a beautiful way of framing it, where we're able to use that. And the ones that were really in tune with that helped, the tribe to survive. And men did their thing as far as the hunting in those pieces. I think that's what you said. That's the image I got, was how
Yeah.
important it was for us to be able to have access for that, for our well-being, for the whole collective.
Yes. Yeah. And including knowing what's sustainable, knowing what animals,
Yeah.
how many animals to cull that would be still sustaining the herd, not just for the human's well-being, but also
Yes.
for the herd in reverence
Oh,
to nature and all the different forms of intelligence. Yeah,
I love that.
absolutely.
I love that. I really have not seen it in that way. Thank you. I'm going to be thinking about that for a while. And I love the fact that you brought in the idea of, it wasn't just about us finding the animal so we can eat, but it's also tuning in to how do we manage in right relationship with that animal or that plant. And understanding is this collaboration relationship
Yes.
between the species, and that it's possible, right?
It's our birthright. Absolutely. Yeah, very true. Yeah. If I may, Laura, there's a I'm a big fan of Craig Foster, who is my octopus teacher. He's
Yeah.
famous for that. He also wrote a book called Amphibious Soul, which is beautiful. And he talks about, there was a podcast interview he did with Tim Ferriss, who's a very popular podcast host, and it was beautifully done. And for years before my octopus teacher even happened, Craig Foster and his brother were documentary filmmakers, and they spent a lot of time in the bush in the Kalahari with the San trackers. And one time he said they were out with the Bushmen and there was nothing in sight. And all of a sudden, the lead tracker just started bursting in laughter, out in laughter. And Craig said he was looking around to see what the cause of it was. And then he found out subsequently, and there was nothing that seemed to be remotely, the reason for that. But there is something that anthropologists have actually coined a term for. It's called wilderness rapture. And it's the pure joy of being alive and working in that rhythm, the flow. And they often talk about how they see these silver threads that connect them to the animal. So they know which animal is sacrificing itself. It's this beautiful, joyful symphony of co-creation with life that our instinctual realm really puts us into. So it's this really beautiful ebb and flow of relationship and knowing and reverence. And that joy for me is like when instinct and intuition and intellect, when all of our full complement of intelligences are working in harmony and unison, where we are an individual working on behalf of or as part of nature for our collective, our human culture, that is like gold.
I love the fact that you brought in instinctual and as intuitive. I know those threads. That's exactly what the sensing one that I've been trying to figure out what's the word language for that. And it is seeing the thread. I totally get that. It was so exciting when you said that. I was just like, I almost wanted to cry. The other part of it, what you touched on, is all of them working together, that it is an ecosystem of our informational system, our inner compass, and collaboration of the dance of life and how we can be co-creators and supporters where it needs to come together. And because the scientific mind, and I enjoy science, but it's wanting to tear things apart. Instead, things need to be together as a whole. Thank you for sharing that example. Was there an unexplained event that might have happened that you would like to share? Has there been something that's in alignment with this conversation that you would feel comfortable sharing?
The work, the inner work that I've done on my own in community with people who are also committed and devoted to unlocking the full complement of our humanness put me in a position where working with the instincts and and emotional intelligence led me back to the deep work of getting back into my instinctual, essentially getting back into my indigenous soul. And so I was called back to this very unexpectedly because I can say I'm rooted more in my instinctual wisdom, led me to horses. So I had an experience, I've had several experiences now with horses and herds of horses that unexpectedly in communion with them. I never planned on it. I never in my mind and my ego had any idea that part of my dharma was working and being in collaboration with horses and bringing humans and horses back together. But my indigenous soul knows this to be true, feels the truth of our kinship with all of life. And so this unexpected being welcomed back into the herd, you could say, the herd of being part of all of life, even before my humanness and including my humanness, is a gift that I am always going to be grateful for. And I'm really excited about what's going to unfold because it's still kind of new, but it's building momentum, and I'm enrolled in a program and to become a certified Equus coach. And so that was very unexpected and very much tied into the instinct and the intuition and just paying attention to the deeper, quieter voices that have become way more of my compass these days. Yeah.
Isn't that amazing how by listening, by having that space of deep listening, you call it that instinctual self, and how it led you to something that your mind couldn't have fathomed.
Exactly. Exactly.
It leads you through a door to something else.
Yes. Exactly.
And that something else, well, it's a relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's being in relationship to another being and being in relationship to that great mystery, you know, just the beauty of that opening and potential.
Exactly. And a lot of that, Lara, comes from slowing down.
Yes.
One of the things that I teach with my students, because I practice it myself, is coming into right relationship with my own natural pace, which is very difficult to do in our nervous system run culture that's all about achievement and running out of time and everything speeding up. And so it seems counterintuitive to use that language, but I don't like that. I think it's actually very intuitive, naturally, to slow down. It's difficult. It can be a struggle to go against the grain of habit and conditioning and the parts of us that are bound up in the falseness of this linear time. So to slow down, to discover the natural, organic spiral nature of time, and to start living more from that place within us, that puts us back in right relationship with nature, with natural cycles, with plants, with animals, with the mineral kingdom. And then we're rooted in that. And then our roots are stable, even as the branches and the leaves are swayed by the wind and the chaos. We have that rootedness in life itself.
Yes. What you're saying right now, the slowing down. And I want to touch a little bit about that slowing down, to be able to slow down and being able to unhook from that mind driven state, from that drive that's been given to us in school and childhood, going into adult, this drive. And if you're not on this drive, this type of energetic drive, you're not considered successful.
Mm-hmm.
There's something wrong. And that ability to find a way to unhook from that. I'm speaking for myself because I had to do that. I have this Capricorn rising and a Capricorn Mars. So I have that element inside me, and having to disengage from that has been fraught with anxiety. Yeah. It's been fraught with fear. Still now, I mean, even doing this podcast, it's like baby steps for me to disengage. Yeah. It's that disengagement, and that ultimately, and I'm getting to this, is trust. Mm-hmm. It's like you're almost like falling back into the trust of the great mystery.
Exactly. Your wisdom.
Yes. And to be able to open up those spaces to have that deep listening. Mm-hmm. I think people, they want to do that. I think there's a big craving for that, but it's this fear of, if I do that, I'm just going to fail. I'm going to end up in a tent on the side of the road, or whatever fear that might be. Lies that have been told to us, these fear stories fed to us. You need to do this, fear stories, and disengaging out of that. Yeah. But to be able to access your instinctual self, that's important to do.
Exactly. And the beautiful thing about the spiral nature of time is that we get to have pauses. The cycle of nature is so implicitly kind. There's a time to expand into greater and greater, what I call capital S safety, which is more of the unknown, right? And then we can come back and rest and integrate. It's not that linear process of like, oh my God, I have to all of a sudden make a 180 turn and go in that direction, because that's what creates the fear. And that's still the same false paradigm of a one directional kind of way to go.
Right.
So to give ourselves space and kindness to reorganize, and our bodies know how to do this, just like the earth. I don't know if your listeners are familiar with Dr. Zach Bush, but I love his work with sustainable soil and regenerate. He understands implicitly. And he says what's amazing is, if anybody in our generation would remember Chernobyl, it was a nuclear disaster that happened out in the Ukraine, Chernobyl, back in the 80s, I guess, or maybe 70s, I don't remember. But now, left untouched by humans, it's flourishing because nature knows. Just leave her alone. That's the idea of, like, even functional medicine is just you support your body to help itself regenerate. And we have that capacity. So slowing down, giving ourselves time, letting our natural wisdom come into play, giving ourselves an opportunity to step back and recognize that our habits and our conditioning and the places where we're hooked in, we've needed that for safety, and we might still need that. So it's so kind to ourselves and gentle as a way of eroding those conditionings in a very feminine, purposeful way, is to just say, no, I'm in charge of my own healing, my own holding, my own reconstituting, my own what I call coming back from contorting myself into becoming a shapeshifter again. Being able to be fluid in my capacity to relish in my own innate biodiversity, my own psychic
Yeah.
biodiversity, in my own timing.
I love that, what you're touching on, our own biodiversity and how many aspects and elements that we have within ourselves that support our well-being
Yes.
and our innate knowing of what to do. I was speaking to someone earlier. When I'm in touch with intuition, serves my purpose. What is my purpose in this life? My well-being, health, and all those aspects. But it's not about just me. It's also connected to the collective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And those types of systems are connected to the collective. How we've contorted, like you touched on, the contortion of the capitalistic systems and all these different things where we put ourselves in this kind of yoke.
Yes.
And then we question, why aren't we functioning?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When we put ourselves in places and situations and behaviors and thought process that keeps us really from fully functioning.
Yes. Yes. Yep. It's a beautiful way to put it. It's so true. And again, when we take back ownership of time,
Yeah.
when we really can find that place of timelessness within us, in our hearts, then we have all the time in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
That's how we change things. That's the subtlety and power of the feminine. And the
Yeah.
masculine in service to the feminine is the choice to stay and to not be seduced by the habits. And we're going to be now and again. And again, the more we can just allow for that's just the natural part of the ebb and flow of the learning curve as being human, that we're endowed with that capacity to say, oop, not right now. I stretched myself too much. I need to come back. When we take ownership of that, then it's less of a boomerang back and forth and more of like a moving with the wave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. We are in that process of that great shift transition for us to come back to ourselves.